purifications unto death in order to enter into that dialogue, that communion.
And what do you think death is?
Well, as I say in the book, eventually you come to a point, after you've gone through many cycles of death and rebirth, you come to a point where the death loses its meaning, because you've learned from experience that you can die, you can lose all your reality reference points. Everything you know yourself to be can be shattered and destroyed, but the phoenix always rises. You always wake up. You, a changed you, always awakens in a deeper capacity, in a deeper level of reality. So from this perspective, eventually you learn that there is no such thing as death. There is only the shedding of one particular set of parameters within which awareness operates, shedding those parameters and letting consciousness expand to a deeper experience of reality. What we usually mean, and I think death of the physical body is something very similar. What you go through in an LSD session, deep one, that type of death approximates what happens when you go through physical death. The body dies, you lose your physical reference points, consciousness expands into a deeper and broader universe. But eventually, the very concept of death loses its meaning in this respect.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two ways I was going to go. So I'll come back.
Yeah.
I'll come back to the way I was going to go on that. The grueling impact of that on, like, I spoke to somebody, and in a way, it's existential. It can be existentially violent, a psychedelic experience.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's moments. I mean, I think that's it's a good description. Existentially violent.
Fair description.
And what's like, and I don't think also that you ever get comfortable. It's not like you suddenly go, okay, I've done 50 and this is going to be no problem, because there's bigger levels. Is that fair to say?
I thought that you would go through a period of, death, rebirth, and purging and whatnot, and you would get to a stable place, and all entries from that point on would be clearer and easier. I found that that's not true. That the universe is infinitely deep with an infinite number of levels, and as long as you keep pushing the outer edges of your experience, if you're willing to go farther, the universe will keep taking you in deeper. And it always will require some deep surrender, some death and rebirth process to move deeper into it.
And when you say universe, what's that to you? What's that word mean to you?
Yeah. Well, my experience is, of course, when you let go of consciousness at the physical level, you enter into a deeper dimension of consciousness, and then later still a deeper dimension and still a deeper dimension. And it's all coherent from top to bottom, and it is all fundamentally unified. For me, it never took a face. It never showed an identity as such. It was always open-ended and perpetually fluid and invisible, and yet very deeply felt. So what do we call this thing? What do we call this consciousness which we dissolve into at successive levels? Some might call it the infinite, the absolute. I call it both of those things. I call it the creative intelligence of the universe. It feels to be the creative intelligence that's inside the universe and behind the universe, different aspects coming forward at different times. In the end, in my heart of hearts, I call it my beloved, because you do, once you enter into it, once you dissolve into it, once you recover your true identity within its identity, then it opens up dimensions of love within you, and it pours dimensions of love within you, that it becomes my beloved. Sometimes I call it the great expanse, something to suggest the vastness, its power, its creativity, its intelligence, and of course, since compassion is a mark of oneness, its inherent oneness. So that compassion is a spontaneous manifestation of its innate oneness.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I think you quoted an Indian guru who used the word "the beloved," and there's a guy in England. He would refer to oneness. He would refer to the beloved. Tony Parsons would talk about unconditional love. That it's, but not the love that we would know. It's love beyond conditions, beyond. It's not a personal. It's the allowance of all things.
Yeah, it's a deeper love than human love, but I think it is alive in the best of us when we experience love. But it's a radical love. It's the love that the Tao has for the 10,000 things. You know, it is the love that being has for its own self, for its own being, because in the end, from its perspective, all of us and all of creation is a manifestation of its being. So how could it not love itself? And therefore, how could it not love us?
So let's see, can we, I'm going to go this route and we'll see where it goes. Say the idea of my beloved and its, who do you think is describing, when you say it's my beloved, who is describing the beloved? You know, this sort of perspective, because there is a perspective that it cannot see itself, only in reflections. And because it is already what's happening, the beloved is already what's happening there.
Yeah.
That it can only ever appear as, anyway, you know where I'm going with that, or have you sensed where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I do.
It's very hard to objectify in a way when that objectifying is almost, well, it is a part of the beloved, is a happening already. It's fresh already.
Yeah.
It's already complete. In other words, what you're saying there, whilst we're kind of talking about experience that you've had and you've written a book, it gives the impression of being once removed, but obviously it's a part already of the whole.
You know, we have all sorts of ideas and stories we tell ourselves about what this totality consciousness is and isn't, and what it can know and can't know. And I think a lot of that is just cultural scripting. It's our best guess. It's our best cultural guess. And our best cultural guess is not very old at this juncture. We've been kind of making these metaphysical guesses or intuitions for 5,000 years. But this intelligence is 13.7 plus billion years in the making and unfolding. And we're just kind of getting to the stop place in our evolution where we can really begin to engage it. So my sense is, I don't know whether this intelligence is not self-aware except through us. That seems kind of outrageously, puts enormous privilege of place on us as to be the mirror of the divine. Why should we assume that this intelligence is not self-aware as it unfolds itself with seeming pointed accuracy through time and space? So what I can say is this: when I lose my boundaries as Chris Bache, when I allow myself to dissolve as Chris Bache and enter into these deeper layers, there's many, many layers of this phenomenon. So some of the early layers have to do with my species consciousness, the mind of the collective unconscious, the mind of my species. Other layers have to do with the mind of our planet, Gaia consciousness. And there are multiple layers going right through species mind, the archetypal mind, archetypal dimensions, the root causes of some of the patterns inside time and space, the root cause even of time and space itself, moving even deeper into dimensions of oneness, permutations of oneness, even entering into the primal void that appears to be the formlessness out of which all form emerges with the Big Bang and subsequently, and then entering beyond even that. And at each level of entry entering into clearer and clearer and clearer states of being, states of awareness. Now, yeah, that. And so it's hard for me to imagine that the being or dimension of being that I have been in it for hours at a time would not also be self-aware in its unfolding. Now, it's also been the case that I've had the experience that this creative intelligence, or an aspect of creative intelligence, met me in my sessions, took me on a cosmic tour, you know, in that chapter, Initiation into the Universe, and it seemed to want to show me its work. It seemed especially pleased to have evolved consciousness to the point where some of that consciousness could come back and be shown what has actually been being worked on for billions and billions of years. So it seems to delight in being known, but I wouldn't say necessarily that it didn't know itself before I knew it. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. Did you get a sense of, or do you still have a sense of despite having spent so much time, that in a way you're still only, it's impossible. It's so, the vastness, that it's still scraping the surface, the enormity of the all of everything.
Yeah. So this was a major change in my thinking. It took place in the 50th session. So my background is I did 4 years of work. I stopped for 6 years, and then I did 10 years of work. So 14 years of active work over 20 years.
Yeah.
But when I was entering into the last 5 years of work, 4 of those years are what I call the diamond luminosity work. And this was 26 sessions. Out of 26 sessions, that's about a third of all the sessions in the book. 4 of those sessions took me into this diamond luminosity, an unbelievably beautiful, ecstatic, empty consciousness that was just clear beyond imagination, just so clear, so hyper clear that once you touch it, nothing else matters except returning to it. Nothing else I had entered in earlier stages mattered in the least compared to connecting with this. And this is what the Buddhists call, I think, the closest thing I could find is what they call Dharmakaya. You know, they have 3 dimensions or 3 modalities of existence: Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. Dharmakaya being the deepest, and Dharmakaya the absolute, the clear light of absolute reality, just kind of the light out of which existence emerges. I'm sorry, I got so involved in the description, I lost track with the original question.
Well, I think I know where you're going though, because we were talking about the vastness and scraping the surface, and you kind of said, yeah.
So I was 50 sessions in. I was in the second of the 4 diamond luminosity sessions. I was as deep into ecstatic diamond consciousness as I had ever gone and would ever go. It was the deepest penetration in that way. And toward the end of the session, I had this experience where my visual field flipped 90 degrees, a huge space opened up, and beyond where I was, there was another reality, worlds upon worlds beyond me, and there was a light there. And a beam of this light hit me, and it shattered me. And I called the light the absolute light, just to give it a differentiating name from the diamond luminosity light. But what it showed me was that there were worlds and worlds beyond where I was, as far beyond where I was as the diamond luminosity was beyond time and space. So that told me that an idea that I had taken into this work, that the purpose of this work was to get to an end point, an end stage, a destination, to go home, something like this, that that was just not an accurate assumption. You do repeatedly have a sense of going home. You do enter into deep, deep experiences of homecoming. And for me, the diamond luminosity was my actual practical destination. I did not go deeper than that. It totally satisfied me in all respects. I continued to do the session work, but for the next 23 sessions, it wasn't going deeper into the diamond luminosity, but it was internalizing diamond luminosity, soaking deeper and deeper into my physical and psychological being. But it's an infinite ocean, and I gave up completely the idea of ever getting to the end of it.